We were on the back of that riverboat. They got in an argument. I think there was a woman extra that Burt felt Darren had insulted in some way. Well, suddenly, they were pushing each other, and Burt just picked him up and threw him off the boat.
In Western movies, there's a lot of them, and they were really good actors. One of the best is our guest today, Michael McGreevey, who worked with Bob Mitchum and Richard Widmark, and actually was in a TV show with Burt Reynolds called Riverboat. Give him a big hand. Michael, come on. Your career as a child actor is amazing. You co-starred in Riverboat with Burt Reynolds. That was early for him. What was he like?
I adored Burt. It was Burt's first big role. And in all honesty, looking back on it, I don't think he was really ready. It didn't turn out well for him. Well, it was hard for me because Darren and I hit it off instantly, and we had a wonderful rapport. It's very rare that when you meet another actor, and there's that instant thing. And it was like we never had to rehearse or do anything. And I had that with Darren McGavin. And looking back on it, there was some lovely, I played the cabin boy on the riverboat. And unfortunately, Darren and Burt did not get along. And so it hurt me to watch them argue all the time. I remember Burt always saying, "Darren, you're not the director this week." Which I later heard years later with Richard Widmark telling Kirk Douglas that, which is interesting. But yeah, I think Darren was such a polished actor by then. He was the star, and Burt was literally out of college. He was a football player at Florida State. That's what I loved about him. He was like a big brother. He bought me my first football. We used to play catch and everything. The real story about Burt's release was never really told, I think. So I'm going to tell you that one. His story was that they just let him go. Universal let him go because he wasn't a very good actor. And there's that famous story of the day he was released, another contract player was released. But he had a big Adam's apple. It was Clint Eastwood. And Burt said to him, well, at least I can take acting lessons. You're not going to be able to fix that. Actually, what happened was we were on the back of that riverboat. They got in an argument. I think there was a woman extra that Burt felt Darren had insulted in some way, which was probably true. Well, suddenly, they were pushing each other, and Burt just picked him up and threw him off the boat. And we always wondered, we always used to bet to see how deep that lake was out. It only goes up to about here. He just sort of stuck him in the mud. And I went, oh my God. And so they pulled Darren out, Burt stormed off. I think that was the final blow, but Burt always sort of covered it up by saying, that it was because of his acting. It was just one of those things where they didn't get along. And he was 23 years old. My mother, he was dating the girl across the street, Lori Nelson, who was a lovely actress that lived across the street from us. And they were having, romantic problems. And my mom would give Burt advice. It was so funny. And he'd come over for dinner. After he dropped Lori off, he'd come over and talk to my mom the whole time. No, he had that Burt Reynolds thing even way back then. The funny thing is that I later worked with Sally Field, and it was so interesting for me that the two of them got together.
Well, and you got to marry Sally Field.
I did marry. I told Burt that one time. I said, what are you doing with my first wife? And he sort of looked at me, and then later on, we were both at Warner Brothers doing something, and I ran into him later, and he goes, I just figured out what you were saying.
Well, if you haven't figured it out, we're talking about The Way West, directed by Andy McLaughlin, that starred Richard Widmark, Robert Mitchum, Kirk Douglas, Dobie Carey, a lot of people, and of course, Michael McGreevey.
Jack Elam, Roy Barcroft. Yeah.
A great cast.
I graduate high school. The next day I get on a plane and go to Oregon and chase Sally Field around the woods for 3 months. It was an extraordinary experience. And I think you mentioned Andy McLaughlin. What a terrific guy, number one. And number two, an underrated director.
On the 16th of April, 1843, the sun rose in the east and raced the first Oregon Liberty Train across the untracked land, emblazoning across the sky the names of the men and the women who took
Well, there was a huge production with so many things that harkened back to the big trail with all of the wagons going, but that only had one leading man. This had three. Did they get along?
Well, like I said, somebody had asked Mitchum at one point, who I had a lot of scenes with. I had a lot of scenes with both Widmark and I was Widmark's son in the movie, and Mitchum was the scout and was my advisor about lady problems.
Excuse me for asking the question, but are Indian women built any different?
I've never been with a white woman but once.
But I didn't have much work with Kirk Douglas. But Mitchum was later asked, he said, Mitch, you're underplaying everything in this movie. And he said, yeah. I said, why? Why, and he said, well, Brother Kirk is doing enough acting for all of us. And I think and it's funny because I've kept in touch with Kirk Douglas over the years, and he said, I was a real, he has that from the stroke, he has that impediment, and he went, I was a real jerk on that movie, wasn't I? And I said, no, you weren't a jerk, you were just a superstar.
Lay that whip across my back. Do it, damn you.
Widmark one time did say, as I said, Kirk, let Mr. McLaughlin do his job, because Kirk was always trying to arrange things, But I learned an awful lot on that movie, working with Widmark especially, just an incredible actor.
You try to take my boy with your rules, I'll bury you. Right here where we stand.
Mitchum had a photographic memory, so he'd look at the script, the scene, and go like that.
That's not fair.
Walk in. I also found that he had auditory perfect memory because a guy named Eddie Littlesky played one of the Sioux Indians in the piece, and he was brought on early to teach Mitchum this long thing that he had to do in Lakota Sioux. And poor Eddie followed Mitchum around for 2 weeks saying, Mitch, could we work on that? He had it all written out phonetically and all that stuff. And Mitchum, of course, avoided him the whole time. And about an hour before we were going to shoot it, Eddie came and and Mitchum said, say it to me. And he did. He read it out. And he said, one more time. Did it one more time. We went up, we shot the scene, one take. Mitchum, and Eddie said, not only was it perfect, he said it was the best Lakota Sioux accent I've ever heard. So Mitchum, boy, what an interesting guy he was. Anyhow, I could go there, but I won't.
Okay.
For an 18-year-old boy, it was a summer of revelation, which is interesting. A kid actor, you can sort of be the fly on the wall, and a lot of times, you can really learn a lot.
Hitch up those wagons. We still got 3 hours of daylight
and the Oregon Liberty Train keeps moving.
And nothing in hell could stop them.
The other thing, John Mitchum was on that too, and John was on Riverboat, and what a lovely guy he was, and a good actor.
Good actor, good singer, composer.
And of course, my hero, Bill Burnett, was on that. I was a big Spin and Marty fan, and I just adored Dobie Carey, and suddenly here I was hanging with Dobie, and I did a couple more movies with Dobie. I was so disappointed. I did a Texas John Slaughter, and I thought, I'm going to get to meet Bill Burnett, because he was one of the regulars on that. He wasn't in the episode that I did. So
that's true. But there was a little kid in that episode, like a Texas John Slaughter Jr. with the hat pushed back.
Yeah, it was Kevin Corcoran's brother, Brian Corcoran, and Moochie's brother. And I got to wear a hat in that one. And the wardrobe people, I loved that hat so much they gave it to me.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I know your dad was an Emmy-winning writer and created a show that I always enjoyed called Black Saddle, with Peter Breck before Big Valley as attorney Clay Culhane.
Yeah, it was a very unusual Western. It was a late-night Western because it was about a lawyer in the West. And it ran 2 seasons. I think it was a little bit too sophisticated for the Western audiences. But I was lucky enough, I did 1 episode. It was one of the few times I got to do something that my father wrote.
Nepotism is so
And he did like 13 Zane Grey Theaters, Tombstone Territory.
Tell us about getting your part on Black Saddle.
Well, it was one of the few times that I didn't have to audition because I knew the boss. So that was nice. And, you know, with kid actors, too, Black Saddle is a good example. We were only as good as our directors a lot of times. I mean, you know, there's a good group here today with a lot of talent. But if you didn't have a great director, and there was a guy named David Lowell Rich that did a lot of the Black Saddles and later went on and did a ton of television. I worked with him several times. And that was the first time I worked with David. And it was the first time that I did something that got me a lot of work later, is I cried on camera. Well, when I think about how long ago this all was, I want to cry anyhow. But yeah, for some reason, I was able to do that. They used to, with most kid actors, they would blow the menthol in your eyes and tear you up.
Or like Hitchcock, pinch him.
Yeah, yell at you. Yeah. So that was the first time I got to cry. It was a very nice little role, and it got me a lot of work later on. But Black Saddle was, my sister just told me recently that she's very into horses and stuff, and as a little girl, my dad gave her, I guess when the show ended, they had the white horse with a black saddle on it, and he gave it to her. And she never knew what it was from. And she still has the horse. Somehow the black saddle got lost.
Well, Black Saddle was one of a multitude of westerns that were being produced at Dick Powell's 4-Star Productions. There was Wanted Dead or Alive, Track Down with Robert Culp, Zane Grey Theater, the anthology series, a lot of different shows. And of course, The Rifleman with Chuck Connors and Johnny Crawford. All of these early shows were producing over 30 episodes a year.
We used to do an hour show, 36 of them. Yeah, shoot it in 5 days. Black Saddles were half hours, so they shot those in 4 days. Peter was very intellectual, I remember. As a kid, you know, I was sort of thrilled to meet him. He was very, very smart guy, very, a lot of book learning there, as they say, and took his work very seriously. But Russell Johnson was also on that show, the guy who later was the professor. And he was the sheriff, and he's wonderful in the series, if you ever get a chance to watch it.
Well, on the back lot there at 4-Star, with all these other shows going on, kid, were you allowed to wander around to some of the other sets?
Yeah, that was where the old Republic was. And everybody was in a Western, and I remember my favorite Western was The Rifleman. And so one day I was on the lot, and I said to my dad, I said, can I go on the Rifleman set to meet Chuck? And
You didn't want to meet Johnny?
no, because I wanted to be Johnny. I used to practice saying Paul. So that was a big thrill, and I walk on this set, and I look back on it now, it's crazy. Sam Peckinpah is directing Chuck Connors in a fight scene, and it was just incredible how well it was done for a television show. And then afterwards, I got to meet Chuck, and I later worked with Chuck, which was great. I did an Arrest and Trial, which was sort of the precursor of Law and Order, 90-minute show. And actually, my father wrote that. That's funny. I hadn't thought of it.
Funny how you get those parts like that.
Those are the only 2 times, I swear to God.
We've got a surprise for you. Your good friend, it's your brother. No, wait, he played your brother. It's Billy Mumy. Billy, come on out here.
Hey, little girl. I'm staging it once again.
Thanks for coming.
All right, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
I was enjoying hearing your tales of the past.
I didn't have a brother, and he was an only child. And we played brothers 3 times?
3 in Disney movies, and there were horses involved. We were riding seals or horses.
Well, I remember Sammy the Seal.
Yeah.
The 2-part Disney episode.
Gee, what do we do? Call a doctor?
A doctor?
You know, one of those veterinarians.
Petey, veterinarians don't take care of seals.
We just saw that. It was released as a feature in Europe. And I don't,
you did?
Well, I saw it with you. And I don't know if I'd ever seen that version, that cut before.
No.
It was cool.
We saw it on the big
longer?
screen, too. Yeah, they released it as a feature in Europe. And, the funny thing, that was 1962.
62.
The kids in this audience, it was at a regular theater, a Sunday matinee, they laughed in all the right places.
Great.
Oh, it was really great to see it. I hadn't seen it in decades. And Norman Tokar, who directed basically the first 100 episodes of Leave It to Beaver, wrote and directed Sammy the Way-Out Seal. One of my favorite people that I ever worked for was Norman.
Me
Great
too.
Guy.
He was one of those directors, like I said, he had been a kid actor in radio. And he was short. That helped. He was down on our
Made
level.
his career go longer as an actor, probably.
Yeah.
As a child actor.
He was great. Right before we would roll, he would come over and he would just kind of get into my ear and he would just say, think. It was a one-word direction from him, but when you're 8 years old or whatever and you're all frenetic and jumping around, he just focused me all the time. I always kept that with me. Norman was great. And I drank moonshine with him when I was in my 20s. He came, it's the only time I ever drank
Well, I'm
moonshine.
glad you were in your 20s when you did that with Norman.
That would have fueled the Jupiter too, that stuff.
Well, working together with Norman Tokar on a Disney film, they treated kids probably better than a lot of the other films that you had worked on.
Disney was, because they had so many children working over there. And it was more of a summer camp feeling.
It was a magical lot, although I can't say that, other lots mistreated us. No. But the Disney lot was, everybody would kind of queue up and play ping pong together at lunch, and if you won the game, you got to hold court. And it was really, we were doing that, and, the commissary was cool, and there were squirrels running around everywhere. It was a great lot.
They had a softball field. It was great. The ping pong, I used to play ping pong with Walt.
What was he like? Did you let him win?
I didn't know him that well. Well, that's what my mother said. I hope you let him win. I never beat him. Fast forward years later, Kurt Russell, who I did a lot of films with and was a good friend, he said, I played ping pong with Walt. I said, I said, I never beat him. And Kurt said, you used to wax him. Kurt had to wax everybody, though. So, it was a fun...
It was great. When we were doing Sammy the Way-Out Seal, after a couple of weeks in, I think it was like a 10-week project, a couple of weeks in, I got called into Walt Disney's office. Now, I'd been working since I was 5, and I'd worked with a lot of so-called legendary, iconic people. But, if I worked with, say, Claude Rains, maybe that didn't really mean much to me because I wasn't at that age familiar with his catalog. But when somebody says, Walt Disney wants to talk to you, that's different, because that's the guy who gives me all the TV shows I watch and all the cartoons I love and Disneyland, etc. So I was a little apoplectic going in. I walk into Walt's office and I go, hello, Mr. Disney? He goes, call me Uncle Walt.
That's what he always said.
And I'm like,
yes, Mr. Disney.
Okay, Uncle Walt, Mr. Disney. And all the whole point of him bringing me into his office was simply to say to me and inquire. He said, I'm seeing the dailies, you're doing a great job, and I really just want to make sure, are you having fun?
Oh, that's great.
And I was like, first of all, this guy is my hero. Second of all, we're out at Paradise Cove, and they built this incredible swimming pool on the soundstage, and we're playing with these seals who were
swimming
so cool.
with seals.
And they were great. And Ann Jillian, we were having a really good time. And I was like, yeah, I'm having a great time. He goes, okay, good. Let's keep it that way.
When Walt was alive at the studio, I remember we were in a bathtub with the seal.
Not Ann Jillian?
That's another story.
That's another story. We were shooting that scene, and you'd look up, and he'd be way off, just standing there, not talking to anybody. He would just, if you were on the lot, he would come by and visit every time. I can tell a story on him. That was not on the seal one; it was on the second one. The Willadine, For the Love of Willadine. But we're leaving the studio one afternoon with our moms, and Uncle Walt I could never call him Uncle Walt. I always said, yes, Mr. Disney.
I know this story.
But he's walking towards us, and I always remember, he wore these alpaca sweaters, and he had his yellow alpaca, and he had a cigarette. He always had a cigarette, unfortunately. And he said, how are you, boys? And he gets down to Billy, and he says to Billy, he says, I hear you've been falling asleep on the set. And I'm thinking, who the hell is he talking about? Because Billy was full of energy.
Somewhat of a zippy kid.
Fall asleep, we would have loved that, and Billy sort of went, yeah, yes, Uncle Walt, or whatever, and he leaves, and my mom and Bill's mom look.
Mike's mom became the Mrs. Columbo on this.
Yeah,
and
we go all the way home that night, and I go, what the heck was that all about? She said, I don't know. We're walking back in the next morning, and they're shooting Mary Poppins on the lot at that time.
Yep.
And the little boy, Garber, I think it was.
Those redheaded kid actors, they all look alike.
Redheaded, they all look alike. And my mom said, And sure enough, we talked to the assistant director, Tommy Leach, and he said, oh yeah, they're having trouble. That little boy's falling asleep on the set.
Yeah, so Walt thought I was on Mary Poppins, which would have been a bit bigger check.
I was going to say, yeah.
I hope you turned that other kid in.
Oh, no, it's a brotherhood,
Well, thank you both for being here today. This has been wonderful, hearing the stories about Walt Disney.
Yeah, he did some pretty good Westerns, too, actually, yeah.